and I'm going to invite him up to tell you a little bit about it. This is William Hayes.
Good evening, and thank you for being here and listening to this piece. I put it on my iPad so I could read it, because I don't want to mess up. This is very important to me, this story that you're about to hear. As William said, I grew up in the AME tradition, so I know all the service music and the hymns and that sort of thing. So what you're going to hear are very specific memories of the AME church. I may not play the entire hymn or whatever, but you'll hear snatches. The piece starts off with the 9 people who lost their lives getting to the church, however way they got there. Some drove in Cadillacs, some walked around the block, some had a cab, some grandsons brought them, and some, but they came every Wednesday night to this Bible study group. And what we experienced is each of these 9 people with their thoughts about the Bible study class they're about to attend, and maybe a favorite hymn or something in their mind. And each one of them, you hear it their own mind by themselves. But we, the audience, gets to hear everybody's noise at the same time. Isn't that the way life is? It's at the same time, okay? The music you hear there is We've Come to Worship, a new tune I created. They get there, the music is stopped suddenly all of a sudden. And the next scene is these people in the basement room where they meet every Wednesday, and they greet each other. They haven't seen each other since last Sunday or last Wednesday. And so there's always that. But each one of them, as they were on the way to the church that night, felt some kind of a shudder. Something snapped at them. And they didn't pay any attention until they got there, and all of a sudden they're in Bible study class. And the tune I use to keep this one together is Sweet Hour of Prayer. And that's the hymn that goes all the way through. You lose it because the people begin to talk out loud, expressing themselves. Nobody is saying a word out loud. They're all feeling this shudder. And nobody knows that anybody else felt the shudder. So they're just all inside, just wondering what's going on. The Bible study class, after we've all had a chance to speak, and the music gets so wild, all of a sudden it just stops again, and we hear from 2 stories up in the choir room, the choir preparing their Sunday's gospel piece. And it's a jazz gospel piece. You can hear the drum and the bass. And then you hear the individuals who are singing, I Know My Jesus. But it morphs from that into just everybody worshiping, and it's just a jazz improv session, which is itself broken again by our returning to the basement where we are ending up the Bible study class. The minister is giving the final prayer, which ordinarily is the prayer of sending a song. What is that word? Benediction. In this case, however, the people have all figured out that I'm not the only one that feels this shudder. Something is terribly wrong. And by the end of the prayer, before the prayer is ended, they all realize they are about to be sacrificed. Somehow or the other, they all knew that they were going to be killed this evening. You hear the music, and it's a prayer. I call it the final prayer. You read it in your bulletin if you looked at it before. The final prayer, the preacher is praying again, and they are all given up to know that this is their last moment together. And sure enough, the gunman who had asked to sit next to the preacher, I see it as my mind as him raising up out of his chair in a circle and pushing them back and making all sorts of racket and carrying on. And then he starts shooting, and you can't help but hear the gunshots. You will notice them. There'll be a lot of noise before, but you will hear the 9 gunshots. Afterwards, you will hear silence. And the silence, I think, is broken too early, too soon. before we can really grasp what has happened, it's broken too soon by the shooter singing Dixie being played on the piano. The church, everywhere, people coming from everywhere around the building with this chaos, and they run in the room and they see this terrible, tragic scene. I'd never tried to do anything like this before in my life, and it was just horrible. It was an ugly thing for me. I tell my kids, I write for the Atlantic Youth Orchestra and conduct it also, and I say that God is always over my shoulder, penning all the notes for me. And that's what it had to be this time. This was not me. This is the Lord working. Finally, after they're all there and they see what has happened, the ME Church, the newspapers in Charleston said the entire town forgave that shooter. And that made American history. The next thing you hear after the shooter is a hymn I created, a hymn without words. I called it the Hymn of Forgiveness. And one of these days, this hymn may in fact have words and be included in a hymnal, remembering this incident. It's not enough that we spend time in church. On Mondays when we leave, we go out into the world and we do the things that we do. I in Pemberton think about ragtime. Our friend Mr. DePogger thinks about jazz and ragtime. But I thought about ragtime and Nearer, My God, to Thee as the tune for a ragtime. We walk away feeling happy with a happy ragtime tune, the only one in these 11 and a half minutes. But we also know that if we go away loving each other, that such things as Charlotte